The call from the stars. The violet skies of Vexor Prime had once reflected in the crystal spires of the Great Harmony, a sprawling metropolis of light and sound where the Vexari had created art and music for 10,000 cycles. Now those skies burned orange with the fires of war, and the spires lay shattered across the rolling plains like the broken dreams of a peaceful species who had never imagined they would need weapons. "Send it again," Elder Kylith whispered, her forehands trembling as she adjusted the ancient transmitter. The device hummed with energy that their civilization had nearly forgotten existed, old technology from the dark times before their renaissance of peace. "Send it on all frequencies, all protocols." The technician beside her, a young Vexari whose scales had barely matured to their full iridescent blue, nodded silently. His eyes, all 6 of them, darted nervously toward the observation dome, where the black ships of the Morvian Empire hung in the sky like obsidian daggers. "This is Vexor Prime." Kylith spoke, her voice steadied despite the fear coursing through her body. "We are a peaceful civilization facing extinction. The Morvian Empire has destroyed our orbital defenses and decimated our southern continent. We have no weapons, no armies. If anyone can hear this, please help us." The message streamed out among the stars, encoded in 47 different linguistic patterns. But Kylith knew that words alone wouldn't save them. That's why she had authorized the use of the Forbidden Signal, a communication protocol developed during the ancient wars, bearing coordinates and authentication codes meant for only one recipient, a species the galaxy had learned to fear and then forget. A world so dangerous that its name had been struck from most star charts. Earth. The Morvians continued their methodical destruction of Vexor Prime. Their ground forces, massive, armored creatures with exoskeletons of organic steel, moved through the crystal cities like a plague, harvesting resources and taking prisoners who were never seen again. Their ships turned fields of rainbow grain to ash and boiled lakes, until nothing remained but cracked earth and steam. 3 days after sending the forbidden signal, Elder Kylith stood in the remains of the communication temple, watching through a cracked window as another district fell to Morvian cannons. The sound of crumbling crystal echoed across the valley, a terrible music that made her inner membranes constrict with grief. "Elder," the young technician called, his voice suddenly tight with something between fear and wonder. "Something's happening." The sky above the ruined city shimmered, a distortion so subtle that at first Kylith thought it was merely tear-blurred vision. Then the distortion expanded, the fabric of space folding inward before snapping back with silent force. Where emptiness had been moments before, a ship now hung in the air. It wasn't large, perhaps the size of a Vexari transport vessel, but its design defied comprehension. The hull appeared to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating an outline defined more by what wasn't there than what was. It had no visible propulsion system, no weapon mounts, no communication arrays, just a seamless void shaped vaguely like an arrowhead. "Is it responding to our call?" the technician whispered. Kylith didn't answer. She was too busy watching as the ship descended, moving with impossible precision through the atmospheric turbulence caused by the Morvian bombardment. It settled in the central plaza of the ruined temple district, touching down without sound or disturbance. For several minutes, nothing happened. The Morvian patrols in nearby sectors hadn't yet noticed the arrival, too busy with their systematic destruction. The remaining Vexari, who had taken shelter in the underground catacombs beneath the temple, watched through surveillance crystals, holding their breath. Then a section of the black ship's hull simply dissolved. Not a door opening, but matter reorganizing itself to create an aperture. From within emerged a figure. It walked on 2 legs, like many species in the galaxy, but its movements held a fluid efficiency that seemed almost predatory. It wore what appeared to be some kind of containment suit, not the bulky environmental protection used by most spacefaring species, but something that looked more like a second skin, black with subtle gray patterns that shifted as it moved. Where its face should be, there was only a smooth helmet with a horizontal band of crimson light where eyes might be. By the first song, the technician gasped, "It's a human." Kyleth nodded slowly. "And we are not their concern, merely the parameters of their solution." 3 hours after the Black Fleet's arrival, not a single Morvian ship remained in Vexari space. 7 hours later, the last Morvian ground forces had been neutralized. The human soldiers, if such limited terminology could be applied to these beings, gathered their samples, collected their data, and returned to their vessels without ever acknowledging the Vexari they had ostensibly saved. Only when the last human had departed the surface did a message arrive at the communication temple, transmitted directly to the system that had sent the original distress call. Threat eliminated. Morvian expansion terminated. Non-interference contract established. Monitoring will continue. Do not contact Earth again. Attached to the message was a vast data package containing full schematics for a planetary defense system far beyond current Vexari technology, along with a detailed report on the weaknesses the humans had identified in Vexari infrastructure, biology, and society, weaknesses that had made them vulnerable to invasion in the first place. The report's conclusion was as brief as it was chilling. Your species chose peace over preparation. This is a luxury offered by distance from Earth, distance we maintain for your benefit. As the black ships vanished back through the dimensional fold from which they had emerged, leaving no trace of their presence save for the molecular remnants of what had once been a conquering army, Elder Kyleth gathered the Vexari Council for the first time since the invasion began. "We survived," one council member said, her voice trembling with relief. "The Deathworlders saved us." Kyleth shook her head slowly. "No, they did not come to save us. They came because we presented them with a problem, and solving problems is what they do." "But they left us defense technology," another counselor argued. "They destroyed our enemies." "They destroyed a threat," Kyleth corrected. "Not because that threat was harming us, but because it represented disorder in their understanding of how the galaxy should function. And they gave us technology not out of kindness, but because our weakness required too much of their attention." She activated the central holographic display, showing the final message from Earth. "This is not the behavior of saviors. This is the behavior of gardeners who have found an infestation in a remote corner of their property. They eliminate the pest, strengthen the soil, and then return to their lives, expecting the garden to maintain itself." The council chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Finally, the youngest council member spoke, asking the question that now hung in all their minds. What kind of world creates beings who can do what we witnessed? Who can rewrite the rules of physics? Who can move between dimensions? Who can deconstruct matter with a touch? Elder Kyleth's gaze moved to the star charts on the wall, to the empty sector where Earth's location had been deliberately obscured. "A world that makes death an art and survival a science," she answered. "A world where every day is a battle against forces we can barely comprehend. A world that teaches its children that the universe is not a place of harmony, but a problem to be solved, a system to be mastered." She touched a control, and the final images from the battle appeared. A human soldier standing amid the molecular remains of what had been a Morgan battle tank, its crimson eye-band scanning the area before it simply stepped sideways into shadow and vanished. "They call it Earth," Kyleth said. "We call it a death world. But perhaps both names miss the essential truth." "Which is?" the council asked in near unison. "That some worlds don't create people," Kyleth whispered. "They create forces of nature. And we are fortunate that, for now, that force is content to leave us in peace." Above them, unseen and unfelt, a small black probe remained in orbit around Vexor Prime. A silent watcher, endlessly vigilant, ensuring that the parameters of humanity's solution remained stable. And deep in space, at the edge of the dimensional fold that had brought them briefly into this corner of the galaxy, the ships of Earth's armada resumed their patrol, seeking the next problem to solve. For the Deathworlders had not come to conquer the stars. They had simply come to organize them. Reckoning of the Deathworlders. The Morvian High Commander Drax stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Will, his primary eyes fixed on the tactical display while his secondary set monitored the expressions of his officers. What he saw in both troubled him deeply. The display showed an impossibility. Thousands of ships had appeared without warning, emerging from what his science officer called a dimensional fold rather than conventional faster-than-light travel. The faces of his crew showed something he had never witnessed in his 30 cycles of military service. Fear. Report, he demanded, his voice deliberately hardened to remind them of their duty. The vessels number approximately 4,000, Commander. His tactical officer responded, mandibles clicking nervously. Configuration unknown. Weapons unclear. They're not broadcasting identification or intention. Hail them, Drax ordered. We've attempted communication on all standard frequencies. They don't respond. Drax chittered in irritation. Then target the lead vessels. Show them the consequence of trespassing in Morvian conquest space. The Indomitable Will was the pride of the Empire's fleet, a dreadnought-class vessel whose main cannon had destroyed moons. Power surged through its weapon systems as targeting computers locked onto the 5 largest ships in the mysterious armada. Weapons charged, Commander. Targets acquired. Fire. 5 beams of concentrated energy, each powerful enough to vaporize a small city, lanced across space toward the black ships. What should have happened was destruction, debris, and the beginning of Morvian victory. What actually happened defied explanation. The beams never reached their targets. Meters from the black hulls, the energy simply disappeared, absorbed into the darkness without effect. No shields flared, no evasive maneuvers were taken. The ships merely accepted the attack as though it were nothing more than a gentle breeze. Silence fell across the Morvian bridge. Then, a single transmission broke through their communication system. Unlike standard communications, this message bypassed their encryption, their firewalls, their security protocols. It appeared directly on their main screen without any indication of how it had penetrated their defenses. The message contained only 5 words. Your technology is being discontinued. Before Drax could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. Not external threat warnings, but internal systems failures. Weapons offline. Engines offline. Life support fluctuating. What's happening? Drax demanded. His chief engineer's voice was tight with panic. Something's inside our systems, Commander. Some kind of invasive protocol. It's rewriting our operational code faster than our safeguards can respond. Isolate it. Shut down the affected systems. We can't. It's everywhere at once. Outside, the black ships began to move. Not in the formations familiar to space combat. No attack wings or defense clusters, but in patterns that seemed almost mathematical, creating geometric configurations across 3-dimensional space. As they moved, pinpoints of crimson light appeared at their apexes. The tactical officer's exoskeleton paled to ash gray. Energy readings are, Commander, they're manipulating fundamental forces, not generating energy, redirecting what already exists. The first wave hit the Morvian fleet like a scythe through grain. Ships didn't explode. They imploded, crushed by gravitational forces suddenly amplified 1,000-fold in localized pockets of space. Others simply came apart, molecular bonds severed with precision that suggested not weapons of war, but tools of deconstruction. On the surface of Vexor Prime, the remaining Morvian ground forces found themselves facing an enemy unlike any they had trained to combat. Human soldiers, if they could be called that, materialized within their fortifications without warning. They didn't use drock ships or teleportation. They simply emerged from shadows, from reflections, from the spaces between moments. Their combat style violated every principle of warfare the Morvians understood. They didn't seek to kill so much as to dismantle. Weapons, armor, bodies, all reduced to component parts, with such efficiency that death seemed almost an afterthought rather than the goal. Elder Killith watched from the shelter of the underground catacombs as the invasion that had nearly destroyed her world was itself destroyed. Surveillance crystals across the planet showed the same scene repeated in endless variations, Morvian forces in complete disarray, facing an enemy that seemed to regard their advanced technology and superior numbers as nothing more than variables in an equation already solved. The humans, the young technician said, his voice hushed with a mix of awe and horror. They're not fighting a war. They're solving a problem. Kylith had only seen images of humans in the Forbidden Archives, recordings from the ancient wars, when the Deathworlders had emerged from their isolated system and shown the galaxy why species from high gravity, radiation-bathed, predator-filled worlds were to be feared. The record spoke of their endurance, their adaptability, and most terrifying of all, their capacity for calculated violence. The human stood motionless for exactly 17 seconds, as if taking in the surroundings. Then it raised one hand, and a holographic interface sprang to life around its arm. Its fingers moved through the projection with practiced precision. "What is it doing?" the technician asked. "Scanning," Kylith replied, her voice barely audible. "Gathering information." A distant explosion shook the ground as another Morvian assault began on the eastern quarter. The human's head turned toward the sound, the red band across its helmet brightening momentarily. Then it began to walk, not toward shelter, not toward the Vexari, but directly toward the source of the explosion. "It's going to fight them," the technician said, hope rising in his voice. "It's going to save us." Elder Killith felt a cold certainty settle in her core. "No," she said, "it's not here to save anyone. It's here to assess." For the next solar cycle, the single human moved through the ruined landscape of Vexor Prime like a ghost. It observed Morvian patrols from impossible vantage points. It collected samples from destroyed buildings, from the ground, from the atmosphere. It mapped communication networks, power grids, defense systems, both those of the Vexari and those established by the Morvian invaders. Not once did it engage the enemy. Not once did it offer assistance to the suffering Vexari. It simply watched, recorded, analyzed. Until the third day, when a Morvian scouting party finally detected its presence. The patrol, 5 massive soldiers led by a commander whose exoskeleton bore the red markings of the elite guard, surrounded the human in what remained of the Grand Archives. The Morvians stood nearly 3 meters tall, their natural armor augmented by powered battle suits. Each carried weapons that could vaporize a Vexari with a single shot. The human stood alone, unarmed, seemingly trapped. "Identify yourself," the Morvian commander demanded in the harsh, clicking language of his kind. The universal translator at his throat repeated the words in standard galactic code. The human remained silent, the red band across its helmet pulsing softly. "Your species designation and purpose." The commander tried again, raising his particle cannon. "Answer or be destroyed." The human tilted its head slightly, as though considering the threat. Then, for the first time since its arrival, it spoke. The voice that emerged from its helmet was neither male nor female, neither young nor old, just precisely modulated tones that sent chills through the watching Vexari. "Assessment complete. Threat categorized. Preliminary engagement authorized." What happened next occurred so quickly that later, when reviewing the surveillance crystal recordings, the Vexari technicians had to slow the footage to 1/20th speed to understand the sequence of events. The human moved, not with the desperate speed of prey, but with the calculated efficiency of an apex predator. It stepped inside the radius of the commander's weapon before the trigger could be fully compressed. Its hand, still encased in that strange second skin material, made contact with the commander's armor at a seemingly random point. The armor shattered, not bent or broke or cracked, but shattered, as though struck at precisely the correct resonant frequency to disrupt its molecular bonds. The commander didn't even have time to scream before the same happened to his exoskeleton, his internal organs, his very cells. The remaining Morvians fired in panicked unison, the air superheating with particle beams and plasma bursts. The human was no longer where they aimed. It moved between them like smoke, touching each one in turn. A finger to a joint, a palm to a weapon core, a brushing contact against a helmet. And with each touch, destruction followed. In 17 seconds, 5 elite Morvian soldiers and their commander lay on the ground, not as corpses, not as wounded, but as component parts, deconstructed with surgical precision. The human stood among them, unharmed, unrushed. It raised its arm again, the holographic interface springing to life. After entering what appeared to be data, it looked upward toward the sky and spoke 3 words that would forever change the fate of Vexor Prime. Send the fleet. In the communication temple, Elder Killith sank to her knees, all 4 hands pressed against her chest in a gesture of profound dread. What have we done? She whispered. What have we called to our world?